Hi, everyone. This is Jason Burek of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest, but I've been following her work for a while now. She's an associate editor at the Foundation for Economic Education, or FEE. She's also written many articles in the past for the Mises Institute, and her articles have also appeared on Zero Hedge. Brittany Hunter, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Brittany, I think you're an up-and-coming star at the Foundation for Economic Education, but you have so many different topics on your articles. You know, you're not writing about just central banks or money. You're covering so many different things, whether it's Google or regulations, marijuana, are just some of your most recent articles. How do you pick out the topics that you write about?
Well, I have a few that I really like, but the drug war, for example, that just has, I think, impacted the millennial generation so much. So that's something that's always interests me. But as far as other stories, what I aspire to do is find something relevant in the news cycle that I can use as a hook, and then tie it back to something, preferably tie it back to something like Bastia or Hazlitt. I was able to do that a few weeks ago. The university had a union that was in charge of mowing the lawn, and some goats had eaten the lawn before they were able to mow it, and the union was trying to sue the goats, which is a very weird story, but it was in the news, and I was thinking, oh, I can connect this to Bastia and the candle makers, and the satire that the French Parliament should block out the sun because the sun is taking the jobs of the candle makers. So it's really fun when I can take something that's relevant in the news cycle and tie it back to some more complex economic theory.
I really like Bastiat and Hazlitt. They, they take very complicated topics and they explain them in easier to understand terms. I think they're very good for beginners who want to learn about Austrian school economics and libertarianism. Wait, did you actually say that the unions were trying to sue the goats?
Yeah, the unions they're still. I think they actually did file suit against the goat owners, but it's so ridiculous.
Oh my God, this is the dystopian reality we've gotten into, where it seems like there's news stories like this a couple of days a week minimum now.
Exactly. It's. I would love to tell you that I had no material to write about, because then that would be the world might be a better place. But it seems like there's always something.
Would you say that your articles are more targeted for millennials?
I would like them to be. I was working before for Generation Opportunity, which is a millennial organization, and that's kind of how I got my start as a writer. So that's how I started. In fact, the first article I ever wrote that went viral was about how millennials are capitalists even when they don't recognize they're capitalists. So that's kind of the little niche I carved out for myself. But I've been able to expand that. Working for FEE has been so great, because I've been able to I still like talking about that, but I've been able to step away and kind of branch out a little bit. So it's been really fun.
That's an interesting point you brought up about millennials not realizing their capitalism, because, if you look at the studies, especially the mainstream studies, they say, I think it's over 50% now for adult Americans in all the different age demographics, that Americans prefer socialism to capitalism. But I don't know about your experiences, because your columns with the feedback you get, but when I ask people who tell me they hate capitalism, who, have jobs in the private sector or government employees, different backgrounds, they can't name me an accurate definition of what capitalism or free markets is. That it's the stereotypes only that they've heard either from their Marxist college professor or from the mainstream media, that making a profit is greedy or things like that.
Yeah, you actually make a really good point. It's so funny, because in practice, we all are capitalists. Amazon Prime wouldn't exist, right? all these things wouldn't exist. Yelp, Uber, we're living in a capitalist society, even with all the regulations. But people don't understand. And when they asked millennials, it was a Pew poll, they said, do you prefer socialism or capitalism? And they said socialism. But then they asked another question, and it was, do you agree with more government in business? And they said no. So it's exactly as you're saying. No one really understands what it means. They hear socialism, they think equality, rights for all. That's great. That sounds so good. Okay, it must be that. But they don't realize that, look what we're seeing in Venezuela right now, that socialism is the antithesis of freedom in almost every possible way. But one thing I always like to point out that I always find humorous is all these millennials, wearing their Che Guevara shirts that they got from Amazon Prime. And you just think, you realize that you are a capitalist by nature. So that's been something that's been really fascinating for me to see unfold.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have discussions with some of these people who are kind of hypocrites, like you said, who drive around BMWs and then have Apple products and wear Che t-shirts. But a lot of them, their minds are closed, unfortunately. So you can't even
yeah, absolutely.
I can't give them economics in one lesson. I can't try to tell them that you like all these nice expensive things. You're writing about how bad capitalism is on products that were built by capitalism.
Exactly. And you actually bring up another good point, and this is something else I use to inspire my articles, is pop culture. Because I think it's really important to sometimes not use the word libertarian, or maybe not even use the word free market when we're talking about things. And so it's been really interesting to me to take a show or take something that's relevant and kind of use that as a platform to teach about something. So with Game of Thrones, because I love that show, I'll watch it and then I'll write about the essence of power, or just what we can learn about, governments fighting with each other. So that's been one way I've seen that I can kind of break through a little bit, is taking pop culture and making it, relevant, and maybe not even using the word libertarian. But I think I've had some success with that. So that's been fun.
That's interesting. I know you just caught up on Game of Thrones. I know you hadn't watched it until recently, and you went on a marathon. I've been following you on your social media. But yeah, Game of Thrones, I mean, a lot of the private sector people in there, I mean, there's just people get murdered. Governments just take whatever they want. And, I haven't heard a lot of people bring that up. But having gone through history, a lot of people are saying, oh, capitalists are greedy and evil and all this. It's, there's a long, long history of governments doing what we see in Game of Thrones as bad. I mean, go back through the history of so many governments. You brought up socialism. Socialism during the 20th century killed over 100 million people. But, you wouldn't really know that from any textbooks or college professors.
No, and I mean, it still is. I think seeing Venezuela crumble before our eyes has been really eye-opening for a lot of people. I'm still shocked at how many people are still not opposed to socialism. But I mean, we're watching a country just dilapidate in front of our eyes. We're watching everything fall right now, and it's tragic because we can't really do anything about it. But there is no greater, example of why socialism just won't work.
But they're not doing the socialism right. They didn't do it right this time. They got to try again.
Yeah, right. It's democratic. It's not democratic. Exactly. There's always some excuse.
Yeah.
Always some excuse.
And then we have, Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn in England and Joseph Stiglitz and others, even a couple years ago on Twitter saying how great a job that Hugo Chavez was doing over there in Venezuela, how that was the model for success of socialism in modern times.
Well, look what happened when Castro died. I mean, I was floored when Castro died to see American politicians, or Trudeau, in Canada, praising this man. You're like, for what? For putting several, hundreds of thousands of people to death. I mean, I haven't been in the millions. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but, Castro was not a good dude. And it's so funny when these people want to, it's almost like they're reconstructing history.
I completely agree about Castro, but there's actually rumors, though, with Trudeau that Castro might be his dad. So he...
Oh, I believe it. The side-by-side pictures when their families were close. It's fun. It's a fun rumor.
Yeah, so I mean, he is... Trudeau is, corrupt and globalist, and he doesn't know anything about capitalism. He obviously hasn't read any of your articles or any Bastiat or any Henry Hazlitt. But, unfortunately, a lot of the people in power, they like the status quo where, okay, it's a problem. The private sector is a problem. Got to, increase taxes, increase regulation, and that's how we'll fix the economy. And it seems that's the way things are going. You brought up Uber, though. I want to talk about Uber. So, a lot of people who hate capitalism love Uber now. I think Bernie Sanders even says he loves Uber. You lived in D.C., in the D.C. area for a couple of years. How bad was the taxi system before Uber and Lyft?
So I was actually there. I think maybe twice had to take a cab in DC because when I got there, Uber was already there. So that was really nice. But one thing I talk about too, not even just Uber, but Uber Eats and things like this, like where you don't have to leave your house anymore. Uber is genius. And I know they've been getting a lot of guff in the news lately because of, what's his name? He just resigned.
I don't know this. Travis something.
Yes. We're getting closer. But Uber in itself is just amazing. And I mean, everyone in DC, Democrat, Republican, everyone is taking Uber because the cabs are they're not reliable. They're filthy, that you don't know as a female. No one knows who I'm with or where I'm going when I'm in a cab. When I'm in an Uber, I can send my location by a click of a button and I'm safe. I feel safe. So it's a huge deal, especially when it comes to being a female, I think, in a big city.
Now, you provide a very good perspective for female libertarians. I want to ask you, in your opinion, why do you think there's not a percentage-wise, in the libertarian movement, people like Austrian School Economics, it's skewed, a lot higher male to female. Why do you think there aren't more female libertarians?
I get asked that question a lot. I'm not really sure I know the answer. And I think the reason I'm hesitant to answer is, because I'm an individualist, that I don't know if I can put everyone in that box and say, I don't know why. I think overall we're a smaller movement. We've grown, don't get me wrong, we've grown so much, but we're still a smaller movement. So I think just by nature, you're going to get smaller, percentages of minorities it's within that smaller movement. But I don't know that I can say for sure why not, because for me, just personally, gender aside, the principles of liberty have always appealed to me and they've always attracted me, and I've had always kind of a problem with authority. So it was something that just really came naturally to me. So I don't know that I can speak for all women, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's fair enough. Stefan Molyneux, who I guess used to be more of a libertarian, and then he supported Trump in the last election. So I'm not sure technically what he is at this point, but I'm not sure if you've seen any of his videos on YouTube. But he says that, the government has a lot of women are not libertarian because, of this cultural Marxism and big government in general, and that basically like big government and all these social programs have replaced a lot of the things men used to do in a relationship with women, and that's why, women tend to prefer, larger government and government help.
I'll be honest, I don't buy into that, and I've got kind of some issues with Molyneux. I used to love him before he kind of went a little crazy, in my opinion. Back in 2010 to 2012, I used to listen to him daily. I don't anymore, and part of the reason I don't is I don't appreciate his views on women. I think he's got a very, very narrow-minded view on women. In fact, every time he opens his mouth about women, I'm just like, I can't handle it. But I don't see it that way. I see it as like I said, I think it's just, of course we're going to have a smaller percentage of women because there's a smaller percentage of women in politics in general, and so being a smaller group, I just think it's a percentage game. And I think we'll get there, and I think we are getting there. It's just a matter of spreading the message.
Yeah, and spreading it the right way. I think, there's a lot of people who try to spread the libertarian or Austrian school message through all logic, that only about the Federal Reserve,
yeah.
that I think, capitalism in general and libertarian and Austrian school economics, they all have kind of marketing problems that,
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to ask you next about that, if you think they have marketing problems.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I was talking to you about with pop culture. One way I see we can get through that. One of my favorite pieces to come out from the Mises Institute was by my friend So Bishop, and it was taking the Federal Reserve and comparing it to Gringotts Bank and Harry Potter. And it sounds silly, right?
Yes.
But that's more interesting than an article about artificial interest rates in the Federal Reserve. People aren't going to click on that. People might look and say Federal Reserve and Harry Potter, wait, what? That's really interesting. That's really weird, and they'll click on it. So definitely, I think we need to appeal to emotions more, which is so antithetical to what we believe. So it's hard for us to do that because we're so lost all the time that I think it is hard for us to get into that. So I think there's a balance. I think if you can find that balance between telling personal stories and getting to people and then kind of disguising the logic in there, that's kind of the key. But that's not always easy to do. It's definitely something we struggle with.
Yes, and I think that's why a lot of women are not attracted to it, because it's not marketed to women. I think it's marketed more to just logical, fully logical white men. Unfortunately, because a lot of the libertarian movement is kind of skewed that way right now in the United States.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely a marketing problem. And I think we are slowly tackling it. But you're right. It seems like it's gotten almost a little bit harder in the era of Trump.
Oh, so I want to ask you about Trump then, your opinion. Has he actually done anything you like so far?
I'll be honest, since I got out of D.C., I stopped paying attention to policy news. It's kind of been like my vacation, my mental vacation for myself, my reward for moving out of D.C. But, I like to try to be as consistent as I can. And aside from Ron Paul, there is no one I would appreciate in the Oval Office. So it's not even that it's just Trump. It's, I don't appreciate the existence of the office in the first place. So I don't know that there's anything I can condone on Trump's part, but I would have said the same thing if it were Hillary or Obama or anyone. So, no, I'm not a huge fan of Trump, but especially with the drug war stuff, that really concerns me. But, we still got a few more years left, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it seems he's either a neocon himself or he surrounded himself with, war hawks and neocons. in that regard. And then Jeff Sessions looks like he's increasing civil asset forfeiture. And you've written articles.
Terrible.
Yeah, he's like a Republican from 50 or 60 years ago. His views are that old. Yeah. But I mean, the Republican Party is that way kind of in general, and Trump's kind of injecting like, fighting street fighter tactics into the Republican Party, and the Democrats didn't seem really used to that. But you brought up Ron Paul. I think if Ron Paul was president, I don't think he could fix anything at this point because of how messed up the Congress is. With corruption and how bad the bureaucracy is, and I'm just glad Ron Paul didn't win the presidency because he would have gotten blamed for the mess that we have
I feel the same way. Like it was, fun to think about that possibility, but he's such a special person that I think of how he would have gotten slaughtered when he wasn't able to, fix these problems, as you said, that it does kind of make me feel very fortunate that he didn't, that he stayed out of that whole mess.
Yeah, so, he got the nomination screwed away from him, like how Bernie Sanders got the nomination screwed away from him by the Democrats. Ron Paul had that before with the Republicans. But I think Trump's going to end up being the bag holder. I think in the next couple of years, I don't want to give an exact timeline, but they've delayed the next global financial crisis for since 2008. So they've delayed it for a while now, 9 years. And, the bag holder is probably going to be President Trump because he's the punching bag for the mainstream media, for the Democrats. A lot of Republicans even hate Trump. So I think he's going to be the bag holder and the punching bag when, things do get worse.
I will say, though, he doesn't do the best job of becoming a sympathetic punching bag. It's kind of hard to feel bad for him. But no, you make some good points, yeah.
Well, I want to ask you now about Ayn Rand. I know you've talked about her in the past. Do you think she did an accurate job predicting, decades ago how society would kind of turn into this mess?
I have such mixed feelings on Ayn Rand. I love her for getting me into libertarianism. In fact, if you have not read it already, there's a great and hilarious book called It Usually Begins with Ayn Rand. And it's about how all of us, like ANCAPs or libertarians, that we got into this through, the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. And even though we don't agree with her, we wouldn't be where we are today without her. And so I definitely take that view. I mean, Atlas Shrugged and all that was my first exposure, to libertarianism beyond just Ron Paul. So that was very important to me. And to be such a powerful, kind of sassy woman back in the day was pretty hilarious too. But I don't agree with all her views on society. She wasn't an Austrian. She had a lot of issues with the Austrian School of Economics, excuse me. So I have some issues with Ayn, but I do think, I think her views on the individual and the philosophy of the individual are vital to our movement.
Yeah, her stories were very interesting, and I don't agree with everything she said, but, some of her character development, especially like Wesley Mauch from Atlas Shrugged, there's just so many. You've lived in D.C., so I'm sure you've met a lot of these types like I have over the years, and there's just so many of them running things. And yet, the evil, greedy capitalist in a lot of points gets blamed for the problems in society, but I think a lot of the problems in society are also caused by the politicians doing deals, either committing crimes, felonies, rules, regulations, taxes, and then, the evil bureaucrats who either ignore the Constitution or don't enforce the rule of law.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I have a couple more points here before I let you go. I want to ask you, how did you become a libertarian then? Do you think you were always, you said you were radical earlier, you were kind of always independent and radical. Do you think you were kind of always that way, or do you think something in your life changed? You read a book or something else?
I think it was kind of a combination of all those things. I think there were things that happened to me over my life, like being audited by the IRS when I was 19. There were these little seeds planted that I didn't know that libertarianism, the word, even existed until Ron Paul came on the scene. But it was these little things. I've always had issues with unjust authority. Like when a teacher would punish me and I didn't do anything, it was very hard for me to just sit back and take that because I wanted justice. And so there's, like I said, there were these little seeds that were sown. But it was like most people, it was seeing Ron Paul's name over a highway and wondering why there were all these young kids so excited about a political candidate, and then Googling Ron Paul and kind of falling into the rabbit hole that way. But for me, I actually, before I even finished End the Fed, I finished Murray Rothbard's The Origins of the Federal Reserve. So I kind of went full in. I went from nothing to just kind of diving right in, and I never looked back. So it's been about 10 years now.
Very cool. And our listeners who are curious, who want to help, spread the idea of liberty or wake up other people, they always ask for book recommendations. So what are, besides your own articles, what are some books you think maybe beginners should read first, in addition to your articles?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, if you want to know about economics, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson, and Bastiat's The Broken Window Fallacy, That Which is Seen, That Which is Unseen, and The Law are just so essential because they take seemingly complex economic principles and they make them so easy and so digestible that anybody can understand. And so for me, when I got into this movement, I thought like, I have no business being in economics. I don't know anything about this. And then you read these books and you realize, wait, it's not that complicated. It's not as hard as they make it sound. So those are definitely, for the economic standpoint, some of the best. As far as our philosophies, like in the libertarian movement, let's see. I think Ron Paul's Liberty Defined is probably the greatest book ever written when it comes to that because it is separated by issue. Each chapter is like an issue or a topic. And so you can flip through and go to whatever topic you're curious about. You're like, how do libertarians do this? Kind of turn the page. And so that to me is probably one of the most essentials. Have to get that one.
I actually learned, I read Economics in One Lesson to start with, but, I woke up during the 2008 financial crisis when I was a stockbroker. I saw Peter Schiff going on TV and saying, totally different things than what all the mainstream talking heads were talking about on TV. And then, instead of reading all the books first, I watched the lectures on the Mises Institute YouTube channel because I kind of learned better with audio and video instead. And then I started getting into the books after that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the videos. And back in those days, you had those epic Ron Paul, Ben Bernanke battles, in Congress, the congressional hearings. So that was like the golden age of YouTube.
Yeah, I actually had Ron Paul on earlier this week, and I asked him about grilling Alan Greenspan before Bernanke. And, Alan Greenspan now is kind of back on our train here. He's warning about stagflation increasing. There's going to be a bond bubble and problems with currencies. So it's funny that Greenspan's done a 180 and has basically come back full circle. Yeah,
no, it's crazy. I mean, who knows how genuine it is, but I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. But he's an interesting man, that's for sure.
Great. Well, I really want to have you back on my show in the near future, because you do a really good job taking those complicated terms and applying them to the younger generation. And it's a breath of fresh air compared to the normal Austrian School economics professors I have on.
Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you so much.
So if our listeners want to follow more of your work, how do they do so?
Yeah, so it's usually at fee.org, but I'm on Newsweek. I'm kind of everywhere. But fee.org is where I'm publishing. I try to publish a new piece every day, so that's going to be your best bet.
Great, and I'll attach links to the archives for your articles on fee.org and also the Mises Institute. Well, I want to thank. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again for your time, Brittany, and hopefully, like I said, I can have you back on in the near future.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Wall Street for Main Street needs your help. YouTube stole $7,200 from Wall Street for Main Street in annualized YouTube AdWords revenues, and they kneecapped our analytics down by more than 80% across the board since September 2016 with their new censorship algorithms to stop the rapid growth of our channel. That was money we could have used to upgrade our website, pay bills, and invest in improving our content and growing our business. Our audience of loyal listeners is all over the globe and so large now that if most or all of our listeners were to commit to donating $1 to $5 each month to our Patreon account, we could easily meet our goal on Patreon. Wall Street for Main Street also accepts one-time donations on our main wallstreetformainstreet.com website. That's WALLSTFORMAINST.com website via PayPal, Gold Money, or Bitcoin. We also accept donations of physical precious metals that can be mailed to us. Thanks to all listeners who have already made a donation, and thanks in advance to any listeners who make a future donation or contribution to the growth, improvement, and success of Wall Street for Main Street.